Hello and welcome to this demo. You probably reached this video because you received this document from me to talk about a Centrify Audit Trail. So what I'll do today is I'll tell you what Centrify Audit Trail is. We'll talk about common event format, what are the categories, how it's configured. You're going to see it in action in a demo. Where can you find documentation? I'm going to show you the Splunk integration. I'll show you how to combine it with Direct Audit, and we'll discuss the differences between Audit Trail, Direct Audit Session Capture, and Centrify reports. So with that in mind, what is Audit Trail? So Audit Trail is it's a framework. So it uses the common event format and each facility on Unix, Linux, or Windows to aggregate all the security operations needs around access control provided by Centrify. So anything related to authentication, privilege elevation, MFA, we will record in common event format. And the common event format is basically generally known as the ARCSight format. What that means is the format that we're writing the information on is usable by any SecOps solution like Logarithm or Splunk or ArcSight or Amazon CloudWatch or Azure. So the key here is that the format that we're using is universal. So the fact that you don't necessarily have a productized version doesn't mean that we don't have it. So Audit Trail looks like this, but it's time for us to talk about the categories of Audit Trail that exist. So Audit Trail can be configured locally to the parameters of the client or the registry on Windows, but most commonly, it can be done by Chef, Puppet, or even group policy. So what you're seeing here is all the categories of events that Centrify will log on. For example, events related to Linux or Unix SSH, events related to Centrify Enhanced Sudo. So there's a lot of types of events that are generated. And generally you can configure those to go to a log file, or you can configure to send the audit trail to a database, or to even a syslog aggregator. The documentation for all the events exists in the Centrify events guide. It tells you everything about this format, and it will go category by category and show you what the events are about and the numbers of the events and the severities on all that. If you want to see it in action, I'm going to show you first for Unix, Linux, and then Windows. So what I have here, I have a system that is going to be tailing the messages log on a Rail derivative Centos. So I'm going to grep for Audit Trail because everything has Audit Trail on it. So bear with me on the elevation. I'm just going to make my life easy here on the MFA. What I have is I'm using DZDo and it's tied to multi-factor. So in here right away, you can see some events, but I'm just going to generate some stuff. I'm going to just generate a login event. So I'm going to log in as my user Lisa. I'm going to go through the motions here. She's going to have to go through multi-factor. And here I am. I was able to log in with Lisa. So let's take a look at the audit trail that was generated, right? So notice first and foremost, you're going to see a timestamp, obviously, and you're going to see the target system, the process, and the thread. So here, this is an audit trail, and for server suite, in this case is MFA, and that a challenge succeeded. Here is PAM authentication, in this case, Unix Linux pluggable authentication modules. So authentication granted to this user, right? When I ran the DZDo with MFA, and not only that, it'll show me the command that was run as well. So the key here is that you can see not only different categories of events, but exactly what happened. So here, this is Lisa's sequence when she was granted access. If she wanted to, for example, do an elevation, and let me just go ahead and clear that. So if I wanted to do, and by the way, I don't need to do it with Lisa. Notice that I elevated using, DZDo 12-hour log messages, right? So notice that there is a right away, there was a command execution for dz-do for user dworth, right? And is executing the command tail as root. So the key here is, you got elevation as well. There's many more categories. I want to keep this video small and avoid any mistakes, so I had to repeat myself again and just move on to Windows. So Windows is kind of the same, but exists on it exists on the application log on Windows. So Windows has this application log. I already have filtered for that. For example, if I wanted to log into this machine using Lisa's account, and I'm gonna switch here. So what you'll see is that I'll be able to go through the motions. The system also uses multi-factor provided by Centrify. So Lisa was able to log in, but I'm going to just refresh here my application log, and let's take a look at what happened. So notice in here, there is an event saying, hey, an MFA challenge was successful, right? And a remote login successful. But notice that CEF format here. Again, we're going with the date, the system in question, the product, right? The category of event, the user, right? Some information about direct audit, right? And notice that MFA was required, right? Same thing if you wanted to do it for privilege elevation on Windows. So there's several ways you can do elevation on Windows. I'm going to elevate here using my alternate account. That means that I have a -A account tied to my user in privileged access service. So notice that I was able to launch Access Manager. If I go over here and I refresh again, my expectation is there's got to be an audit trail event here. Notice that, run with an alternate account success, right? This was the program that was launched, but notice here the whole CEF format here. So that being said, what can you do with Centrify Audit Trail, right? Like I said, there's productized integrations, but you can go beyond that. Let me just show you a little bit of some of the dashboards provided by the Splunk app. So there's a Splunk app, right? I may have timed out here, but there's a Splunk app for Centrify that you can download freely from the Splunk base. And notice that all the dashboards that it gives you, login activity, right? So it provides you logins by system, logins over time, right? Some information that comes from Audit Trail. Privileged activity, right? Notice that privileged activity, the systems, the density, the popularity of the commands, the types of commands. Notice that it's combined, Windows and in UNIX, like a single pane of glass. And there's anomalies, right? For example, failed logins, denied privileged activity. So notice here as well that there's a bunch of stuff that you can see. And you have, for example, other activities, including alerts and reports. So this is also productized for HP ARCSight and IBM QRadar. But once you know how CEF works, you could create things like here. I created a blog post many years ago related to how you can use CloudWatch and the framework that we have for Audit Trail to be able to create your own metrics and do your own dashboards. So once you know what you're looking for, and by the way, also alerts as well. Once you know what you're looking for, it should be fairly easy. So next, let's talk about, where it's documented, but talked about Splunk. But when you combine with Direct Audit, which some of you have, now Direct Audit will provide you more additional information. For example, information is going to be living on the audited events and reports. So it provided that you're sending information to Direct Audit. Notice that I have, all the information that was done, right? Run with alternate account success. If there's a session tied to it, you can go into it and replay it. So the difference here is that an audit trail gives you SecOps information. I have horrible resolution here, but you can see exactly what happened. But you can tie it into session capture and replay. That provides you with a very interesting difference. Session capture replay versus audit trail events. Audit trail events, standard edition has it. You don't need Direct Audit for this. Direct Audit is going to come into play if you want to correlate with a session. But there's also a lot of reports that are here, like for example, privilege activity. When I look at privilege activity here, I can see reports that I pre-generated those about what activity the user is doing. For example, notice here, even sudo activity has been audited. You see, there's a myriad of things that you get when with Audit Trail, and this is becoming centralized using Direct Audit. You can also get administrative activity. So who audits God? That's the question. So in here, you can see that I have my user Diana performing activities on the zone, add moves and changes, right? So the key here is that you also have the ability to demonstrate to auditors what administrative activity has been happening in the Centrify side. Finally, like I said, there's a contrast between session capture, right, which is what we can do when we are replaying a session, right, versus the activity data, which is provided by Audit Trail. And then finally, there's Centrify reports, as you know. So reports allow you to see information about entitlements. Remember, so when you're solving this problem, Audit Trail is for my security operations. Centrify reports is for attestation. It's a long topic in itself, but it actually shows you a critical information, like for example, who has more privileged access, what computers grant more privileged access. For example, you can go computer by computer and see, for example, notice my Centos 6 machine here. I can see, for example, which users can log in, right? What roles do they have? When did they get that assignment, right? And I can drill down also and see what does that role mean? What commands does it provide? And those are canned reports that are provided through the Centrify report services. So it's important to differentiate. We have spoken about Audit Trail is included with Server Suite. You can configure it to be audited locally or into a central server or in Direct Audit, right? That's one thing. The other thing is session capture. That's what's provided by Direct Audit. And then finally, Centrify reports, which is an extension to a utility that you can use to synchronize data for access control, privilege, all into SQL Server or Postgres, and you can report on it. So I'm hoping that this video gives you an overview of Audit Trail and all the cool things that it can do.